Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Wednesday. That means Epic Comic Book Wednesday, when Michael K. Vaughan and I combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about comic books. Some comic book subject. Uh, he picks what we talk about, and then we both talk about it on our separate videos. I'll leave a link to his, because I'm sure his is up already. I haven't looked for it yet. But he always posts his early, and I always post mine late. So I'll leave a link to his. I'm sure that more of you subscribe to him than subscribe to me, so you probably don't need the help. But you like to be thorough here, especially since Hannah at Hannah's Books hangs on these comic book videos. Can't get enough of them. And today we are dealing with a milestone in Superman, in the history of Superman, which I think was spurred by the fact that it and other things connected with it have just been reprinted by DC in these DC Finest paperback volumes that they're doing. I still haven't got one of those reprint volumes. I should. I must. But I still haven't done that. But Michael K. Vaughan has zero self-control when it comes to new comic book reprints, so he has lots of them. And one of those is devoted to the subject of our video today, Supergirl. Not any of the fake phony baloney Supergirls. Not the clay monster Supergirl, not anybody else, but the actual original Supergirl. Who has her own volume in that DC Finest list. No idea why. No, I know why. I know the political reasons why, but I don't know why DC Finest is reprinting some of the things they are instead of other things. I don't understand that at all. I don't understand why 5 of the first DC Finest were not Superman reprints or Batman reprints. Instead, virtually nothing like that. Instead, it's a whole bunch of third-rate characters getting their reprint volumes. Good for them to get them out in the sunlight, but Mike got a volume about Supergirl. And the thing that we're talking about today isn't just Supergirl writ broad. It's Action Comics number 252, in which Supergirl makes her appearance. I don't have Action Comics number 252. I did for a long time. I had all of them for a long time. No idea what happened to it. It may have drowned in a box in a basement in Tipton, Iowa. Or it may have been destroyed by beagles, which is a theme that horrified a lot of you in a couple of videos that I've done recently. I've now got a lot of people, especially new people to the channel, saying, how much of your stuff over the course of your life has been destroyed by beagles? And the answer to that question is, I don't know. It's not a little amount. I don't have that individual issue anymore. Of course, I have the e-copy. But I also have this thing. This is 80 years of Action Comics. Big volume that DC Comics put out that I couldn't resist getting. There've been a lot of volumes like this. And this is landmark issues in the history of Superman. And one of the issues in here is Action Comics number 252, where Supergirl makes her appearance, that famous cover. Okay, let's go over a few basics here, shall we? Superman, I know that Hannah already knows this, but Superman is Kal-El of Krypton. He is the son of Jor-El and Lana of Krypton. Jor-El is a scientist on Krypton. He is part of the Science Council. And he alone, among all his complacent brethren, has realized that the planet Krypton is unstable and is going to die. That Krypton is going to explode. It's going to irradiate and explode, killing everyone on the planet if action isn't taken. And Jor-El goes before the Science Council and says, I tell you, Krypton is doomed. We still have time. Let's build a fleet of space arcs and leave our homeworld before it kills us all. And the Science Council mocks him. Krypton is as steady as could be. You're just an alarmist. So Jor-El does the only thing he can do. He doesn't have government backing. He doesn't have the sanction of the Science Council. So he privately, secretly builds a rocket. Not a fleet of spaceships, but a single rocket that can save his son, his little baby son, Jor-El. Now, that's the original story, is that Kal-El is rocketed away from the doomed planet Krypton right before it explodes. Usually in most origin storytellings of Superman, both in screen and in comics, the hour that Krypton explodes, the rocket ship has launched. I guess as a dramatic ploy to make sure that you don't then ask the question, well, why didn't all of Jor-El's neighbors wonder where this rocket was going? Why didn't the Science Council know? that his escape from planet Krypton has to be relatively synonymous with the explosion of the planet Krypton. He wanders through space and he ends up on Earth, where the combination of lower gravity and yellow sun radiation gives him superpowers, a vast array of superpowers, not just when he's on Earth, but in most of the galaxy. And he takes on the mantle of Superman. He becomes a superpowered superhero. But he has a bit of loneliness involved, obviously, more than a little bit of loneliness, because he's the only one. He's the only survivor of the planet Krypton. That turned out not to be true. As Julius Schwartz and a whole bunch of other people started elaborating on Superman's mythology, one of the gimmicks that they went to way too often was other survivors of the planet Krypton. If you've got a humdrum half year of sales at Action Comics or Superman Comics, that's a way to goose sales, is to float the idea that someone else survived the destruction of Krypton. Turns out lots of people did. Lots of people survived the destruction of the planet Krypton. A whole major city, imagine Chicago, a whole major city, the city of Kandor, survived because a space alien known as Brainiac shrank the city and put it under a bottle. But all the people are still in there. They're all still alive. And what technology can do, technology can undo. So there are thousands and thousands of Kryptonians alive in Kandor, in the bottle city of Kandor. And there's also the fact that for an unknown length of time, but not a small length of time, the planet Krypton was sentencing its criminals to something called the Phantom Zone. They don't send them to jail. They send them to an alternate dimension where they exist as telepathic ghosts. So they can't punch each other, they can't punch anyone else, and they can't leave the Phantom Zone. They can be brought out of it with technology, just like they were sent into it, but they can't leave on their own. In later Superman lore, it's Jor-El, Superman's father, who invents the Phantom Zone. So it's not an unlimited number. It's not like they've been sending criminals there for centuries. But it's a large number of people, of Kryptonians. And of course, it's an unaltered dimension. The Phantom Zone survived the destruction of Krypton just fine. So that's a lot of Kryptonians. Superman is not the only Kryptonian. But he's the only Kryptonian on Earth flying around in the bright sunlight in a bright costume, I guess, is the thing. And the writers, the powers that be at DC Comics for Action Comics decided to change that. They decided to do a story in which a teenage girl, her rocket crashes to Earth. Superman actually sees it as Clark Kent. He sees the rocket dashing to Earth and thinks, well, this is a job for Superman. I'd better get there to save it. And he's too late. Which is a weird plot anomaly right there. Superman is never too late. But he's too late. The rocket crashes before he can get to it. And it just so happens that the crew is not dead because there's only one person on board. And it's a girl who has superpowers and is wearing a version of Superman's own costume. Supergirl. And Superman says, here, let's get back to that issue. He says that it's impossible. I was the only survivor when Krypton exploded long ago. Besides, you weren't even born at the time. To add to the mystery, why are you wearing a super costume like mine? How did you know my name? How can you speak the Earth language so well? There are hundreds of languages on Earth. But okay. And she says, baffled, Superman? Let me tell you my story as my parents told it to me. When Krypton blew up, you were not the only one to escape. It turns out that a huge chunk of the planet blew off into space. Let's show you this Wayne Boring artwork, very aptly named. A huge chunk of the planet blew off into space. In later iterations of this story, the city is domed and self-contained. Otherwise, of course, this would not work. I guarantee you, if you blew South America off into space, everyone there on that planet would die. It wouldn't just be that they matter-of-factly maintain their atmosphere and their gravity and everything else. But they're blown off into space, they maintain their gravity, and we're told among the pitiful few survivors was a scientist named Zor-El. Not Jor-El, but Zor-El, who tells everybody, Fortunately, a large bubble of air came along with this chunk. Also, the food machine is still working. We can stay alive indefinitely. But that night, tragedy seems to strike this little colony of Kryptonians, because the ground underneath their feet, the chunk of the planet that's been blown off by the destruction of Krypton, has been turned into kryptonite. That's where kryptonite comes from. It's irradiated pieces of Krypton. And it's going to destroy them. Oh, great stars. The ground is glowing green. The nuclear explosion converted our shattered planet into kryptonite, an element whose radiations can poison and destroy us in time. And again, Zor-El has a solution. In his laboratory, which I guess survives, he just happens to have sheets of lead. And they roll the sheets of lead. They cover every inch of the surface of their world with these sheets of lead in order to protect them from the radiation. Now, I don't want to start nitpicking right away. That's not how radiation works. Okay? If you're this, then you've already got radiation sickness. It's not like if you cover it up, this goes away. No, it doesn't. This doesn't care what you do subsequently. It means you have radiation poisoning. And also, laying a layer of lead on top of an irradiated asteroid would not help. It would not protect you in any way. But in the story, it does. And the Kryptonians go on about their business. For years, they drift in space, going on about their business, including going on about their business, if you know what I mean. Because Zor-El finds a pretty little woman and has a baby. And she's got a little crib and everything. But when she's a teenager, disaster strikes again. These Kryptonians cannot catch a break. A meteor shower hits their little world with its air bubble and its lead streets. A meteor shower hits their little world and starts to rupture the lead sheeting, which would expose them to the active kryptonite that they've been riding on this whole time. Why in all that time, 16 years, they don't look for another world? Find another world? Why this is the first meteor shower? That certainly wouldn't happen. Is not explained at all. Instead, we're told that Supergirl's father raced against time in his lab, constructing a space rocket. We have a month before kryptonite radiation slowly poisons the air, but before that fatal hour, this rocket will send our daughter to another world. The food machine makes food. It's some kind of matter replicator. And it's not like this is happening suddenly. Zor-El has a month of time. So why is he making a rocket that's just big enough for a little girl? Why isn't he making a rocket for the whole family? Why is he intentionally making his daughter an orphan? Why isn't he making rockets for everybody? Why isn't everybody making rockets? The whole colony knows it's doomed. And he looks through his space telescope and sees the planet Earth. He sees Superman from the planet Earth with superpowers and says the city of Metropolis pays tribute to Superman, who originally came from the planet Krypton. How do you know that? How does Zor-El know that? He gained his superpowers in Earth's lesser gravity. Then you too would have superpowers on Earth, Kara. That's Supergirl. Kara, Zor-El. We'll send you there to meet Superman, who is one of our people. No explanation is given for why Zor-El knows that Superman is from Krypton. But the space telescope can see that Earth is habitable by Kryptonians. So are other worlds habitable? And if you know that Earth is habitable, why is any of this happening? This makes no sense at all. None at all. And that's nothing compared to what follows, because Kara's mother sews her a Supergirl costume so that it will signal to Superman that she's from Krypton. I guess because that'll make him nice to her, like her ability to fly through the air and bounce bullets off her skin isn't going to tell him that she's from Krypton. Like her simply saying I'm from Krypton and speaking in Kryptonese is not going to be enough. Instead, the costume has to do it. And while her mother is making her special costume, her father says, "The space rocket is finished. Hurry, the kryptonite radiations are filling the air like poison." Okay, so are you irradiated or are you not? But the rocket fires off. And her parents are sobbing, saying, we're going to miss you. And she's sobbing, saying, I'm going to be an orphan. Why? Why? You have a month. You can't make this big enough for your own family, much less everybody else on this little sliver. But no, it doesn't happen. Instead, she flies through space and crash lands on Earth a minute away from Superman. And only then do they compare notes and realize that Zor-El, Supergirl's father, must be the brother of Jor-El, Superman's father. It's only at that point that they do. So, again, a million questions. Did Jor-El tell Zor-El that the planet was doomed? If Zor-El is capable of building a rocket, did Jor-El warn his brother ahead of time? Why don't you make a rocket for yourself and your wife? At least, if the Science Council is going to stop us from doing anything else, we can at least save our families. Did Jor-El tell him that? No. Zor-El's caught completely by surprise. Everyone in this little chunk of the planet is caught completely by surprise. But Zor-El is able to build a rocket. So both brothers have a scientific genius. But Supergirl says, Jor-El? Why, my father's name was Zor-El, your father's brother. And Superman says, great Scott, then you're my cousin. All the people on Krypton, all the people on a whole planet, the one person who is saved from the wreckage of that floating city, the one person who doesn't die. Keep in mind, that asteroid now has who knows how many hundreds of Kryptonian corpses on it, floating through space forever. We don't know that Supergirl ever goes back to it. The one person that makes it to Earth is not just a fellow Kryptonian, but Superman's first cousin. Oh. Superman says, we may be orphans, but we have each other now. I'll take care of you like a big brother. That's what Superman says. And Kara Zor-El says, thanks, cousin Superman. You mean I'll come to live with you? And right then, right at that minute, the echo of what he said is still in the air. Superman proceeds to treat her not like a big brother, but like a horrible combination of a kidnapper and an abuser, a groomer. Because he imposes on Kara a weird dystopian life for no reason at all. None whatsoever. He tells her that since she's an orphan, she belongs in an orphanage. And that she must adopt a secret identity as a human being. And go into this orphanage, wear a wig, give yourself a civilian name, start lying to everyone around you all the time until you learn your powers. I want to point out something here. When Superman first goes to see the rocket, he says, it came at a greater speed than any rocket known on Earth before. In fact, it reminds me of the rocket that brought me to Earth this way when I was Super Baby years ago. The reason that Superman gives for why Supergirl cannot act publicly is because she needs time to learn her powers. Just 2 pages after we are reminded that Super Baby was a thing. Super Baby did not need much time to learn his powers. Supergirl is flying in this issue. She flies out of the rocket. So I don't know how much training she needs. But Superman tells her, I'm going to put you in an orphanage. You're not going to live in the Fortress of Solitude. I'm not going to come up with some lame story for Clark Kent's cousin to live with him in Metropolis. Instead, I'm going to put you in an orphanage among strangers. That's where you're going to spend 99% of your time. And I'm not going to put you in an orphanage as Kara Zor-El. We have to come up with a civilian name for you. Superman flies off to get her a disguise. How does that work? He flies off to what? Go into the girls' department of the Metropolis department store? Fly through the window of the girls' department and say, I'd like a skirt and a blouse and maybe some pretty shoes and a wig? What are people going to think of Superman after that? No shame, no kink shaming. But how did that purchase go? He flies off to get her disguise and comes back and says to her, well, you'll have to come up with a civilian name. And she picks the name Linda Lee. And even Superman is incredulous. Superman's childhood girlfriend was Lana Lang. Superman's adult girlfriend is Lois Lane. Superman's first love was Lori Lemaris. Superman's enemy is Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor's sister is Lena Luthor. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Out of the blue, she picks Linda Lee. And okay, Linda Lee it is. You go to this orphanage and you live with these kindly people in a dorm room with a bunch of other girls. And you wear a wig the whole time. See, her blonde hair is gone. She was wearing a wig the whole time as she is dropped off in this orphanage. Superman says, someday the outside world will hear of you, Supergirl, but for a long time to come, you'll live here quietly as an ordinary girl until you get used to earthly things. Keep in mind, Zor-El and presumably young Kara have been studying Earth through the space telescope for at least a month. And she's got super brain and super memory and super recall and all that sort of stuff. And also why, well, we'll get to it. Superman decides to use her as his secret weapon. When he drops her off at the orphanage, he tells her that sometimes I will use you, but only as a secret weapon. And then he flies off. And we get this. The kindly matron of the orphanage saying, sorry that the mirror is cracked, that the window is dirty, that the bed is wobbly, that the floor is filthy. This is where he leaves her. The most powerful being in the galaxy. This is where he leaves his cousin. On the day that he meets her. She uses her superpowers discreetly to clean the room because she's a good 1950s housewife. And then that's it. That's the end of the story. Supergirl flies out at night. Obviously doesn't need much training to fly. She flies out at night. And sees a poster for a documentary about Superboy, about Superman when he was her age. And wonders, will I someday do as good a job in Midvale as Supergirl? What will the future bring for me? We don't really know. We know what the immediate future will bring, which is her creeping back into the orphanage to sleep in her ratty bed with the spider webs overhead. While Superman does what? So he drops her off at an orphanage in Midvale. It's not even in Metropolis. He drops her off at an orphanage in Midvale and then does what? Flies back home to his apartment. This is a day well spent. I discovered that I have a teenage cousin, the daughter of my uncle. And I stuck her in an orphanage. I don't wonder what she's doing there. I don't know. I didn't talk to her at all. We didn't share any stories. She grew up on a chunk of Krypton, but did I ask her about any of that? No. Instead, I immediately gave her a secret identity and stuck her in an orphanage. Why? The reason Superman has a secret identity is the same reason all the archetypal DC superheroes have a secret identity. To save their loved ones from revenge from their enemies. Same thing in the Marvel Universe. You have a secret identity because if your arch enemies knew who you were, they would attack your parents, they would attack your friends, they would attack your co-workers. Kara Zor-El doesn't have any of that. She's an indestructible being from the planet Krypton. She has no vulnerabilities, and literally the only person she knows on Earth is also invulnerable. So there is no reason for her to have a secret identity. None at all. None whatsoever. It's weird. It's downright unhealthy. It's just, I know you're not supposed to read too much into this, but I want to make 2 points here. One is little, which is that this is not the first superpowered girl that has appeared in Superman comics. A couple of them appeared in different issues in Superboy. Those issues were wildly popular. One of them, at least, appeared in an earlier issue of Superman comics and was also wildly popular. Fans loved it. Of course, those storylines resolved. Those superpowered girls didn't stick around. Whereas the whole point of this story is that Supergirl is now part of continuity. She's not just somebody who gets superpowers and has lots of fun and then loses them. She's here in continuity now. There's another costumed Kryptonian living on Earth who just happens to be Superman's cousin. Point number one is that this is not the first time that this has happened. So as a one-off story, this wouldn't be bad at all. It would fit right in with a few stories that have gone before it. But my larger point, number two, is going to be difficult, especially since I don't know what Michael K. Vaughan is going to say about this. I can guess, but I haven't watched this video, so I don't know. But I have had an idea about Supergirl for a long time, for a long, long time. In fact, from just about when that issue of Action Comics came out, I've had an idea about Supergirl. I've had a prescription that I think DC should follow with Supergirl. I've had it from the beginning. And that is retcon her out of existence. Retcon her to oblivion. Now, I came close to that. I came weirdly close to the resolution of that in a miniseries called Crisis on Infinite Earths that DC Comics did, where they kill off Supergirl, where she is just killed, where the villain, the amorphous, dumb villain, Anti-M, blasts her with an energy blast that kills her. In Crisis on Infinite Earths #7, that has a famous cover, even more famous than the cover where Supergirl makes her first appearance. I read that issue and had two reactions. I got it on the stands, and I read that issue. I had two reactions. Number one was, she's invulnerable. Okay, so your energy blast isn't going to hurt her at all. Nothing's going to hurt her. If you think that's a limit on your storytelling abilities, then get another job. Find something else to do. Because there are plenty of people before you that didn't think that was a limit on their storytelling abilities. That was reaction number one. And reaction number two was good. Good. I don't like that a simple energy blast kills a Kryptonian. Kryptonians are invulnerable, except to kryptonite. But I'm glad the character's gone. One of the only upshots of Crisis on Infinite Earths was that it made Superman the only living Kryptonian. It retconned Supergirl out of existence, as it should have. I want to say something incendiary here. I want to posit that an origin story as dumb as the one that DC Comics gave to Supergirl should mean that the character does not survive. It should mean we tried, but we were all drunk or we were all distracted, and we gave her one of the worst origin stories of all time. An origin story where literally at no individual point anywhere in the story does anything make sense. And, we have to write lots of these things, lots of these stories every month, month after month after month. So you're going to write some duds, fine. No problem. We're all human here. Writers write duds. Retcon the character. Get rid of the character. You wrote the story. It was entertaining for an afternoon for a whole bunch of kids who read the comic, but you can't stick with it. You can't stick with it. A whole asteroid of Kryptonian corpses floating through space. A teenage girl who was rocketed to Earth and immediately shoved into an orphanage. No, you can't do any of this. You can't do any. You can't stick with this story. So just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. If you really, really want to have another Kryptonian on Earth, you've got lots of other opportunities other than this. This is terrible. That a roving space villain shrunk the city of Kandor and kept it in his collection. Well, all of those Kryptonians in the bottle city of Kandor are potentials for a story. And the Phantom Zone is too. The criminals in the Phantom Zone live there for a long time. They have nothing to do but think about their crimes. What if one of them repents? Genuinely repents. Superman has the ability to bring anyone he wants out of the Phantom Zone. What if he does that? Wouldn't that be interesting? That would be very, very interesting. But a teenage girl who just pops out of a rocket is not interesting. From a genocidal father and a ridiculous origin story, no. The whole of it is so bad that it should not have stood. Instead, it did stand, and for decades we get this dumb character. No one knew what to do with Supergirl. No one did. I don't know if Michael K. Vaughan has actually read the Jim Mooney artwork issues that he has in that DC Finest volume, but he will see once he does read it. No one knows what to do with this character. Is she going to be a moron? Is she going to be a mopey teenage girl? Is she going to be both? Certainly when she's a little older and she's wearing a miniskirt, she's a super nymphomaniac. There's nothing even remotely like a character, nothing even remotely like an individuality, certainly nothing like the mythic resonance of Superman himself. No. Not at all. Not at all. None of it works. Not in the slightest. And never has. The best thing that any DC writer, the best bit of drama that any DC writer ever got out of Supergirl in any characterization, in any iteration of the character, was to kill her off. that was the most interesting that Supergirl ever was that moment. That's pretty bad. So get rid of her. Just retcon her out of existence. So there you go. How's that for a bloodthirsty episode of Epic Comic Book Wednesday? You should turn to Michael K. Vaughan's video for what I'm sure will be a cheerier assessment. But some origin stories are not recoverable. You can't recover from an origin story as bad as this. None of it makes any sense. So just get rid of it. Just pretend that it never happened. Make it imaginary. That Superman was imagining things. Why he'd imagine a 16-year-old cousin, I don't really know. And that also became a story. There were decades and decades where probably it's in some of the issues are in that volume that Michael K. Vaughan has. There were dozens and dozens of issues where Supergirl is trying to matchmake for Superman. And even sometimes wishes it could be her. All just gross. All just completely gross. I realize that we have a paucity of super female characters. Especially original super female characters. It makes you all the more appreciative of Wonder Woman. That you get so few that, I mean, you get Ms. Marvel, a knockoff of a male character. You get She-Hulk, a knockoff of a male character. You get the Wasp, a knockoff of a male character. It's rare, and it might have been possible. Something might have been possible. A teenage girl from Kandor. A reformed middle-aged woman criminal from the Phantom Zone. Some of those things might have been possible. I don't know. I still wouldn't really have agreed with them. But this is an origin story that's so bad that it should bury the character. So there you go. How's that for a nice, bright, sunny return to Epic Comic Wednesday? Who knows what I'll condemn next week. Anyway, I'll wrap this up. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.